Hey, is this you?
I'm hitting buttons, but why isn't it dying quick? I don't know how to fight.
If you're new to RPGs or games like this, where you have multiple characters that you have to rotate in between to fight, and there's a bunch of skills and a bunch of moves and a bunch of blah blah blah, it can get a little confusing. I've spoken to a lot of people who, when they're fighting, they just smash a bunch of buttons and hope for the best. And that'll get you pretty far, but eventually, hoping for the best won't be enough. Especially if you want to beat stuff like the Spiral Abyss and some endgame content, which we should be getting more of soon.
Foreshadowing.
So here I'm going to touch on a little bit of team building, a little bit of character roles, a little bit of rotations, mostly geared towards beginner and mid-game players, but stick around towards the end and I'll talk about some more advanced stuff for more of the end game players. And in order for you to understand what's going on, we have to know the difference between an off-fielder and an on-fielder. So let's boogie. So an on-fielder is someone that you have to physically use in order for them to be useful. Like Diluc. He's only doing damage when you're on-field using him. Meaning, he can't leave anything useful on the field after he's done with his rotation. He's not helping the team in any way. But someone like Farina would be an off-fielder. Meaning, if you activate her skill, switch out, back to your on-fielder, her little buddies are gonna still do damage whether or not she's on the field, which is important to keep in mind because if you're spending on-field time with your off-fielder, you're just missing damage. A quick reference, this link will show you whether your character is an on-fielder or an off-fielder. But other than checking out this list, the only other way you could figure it out is by reading through their talents and figuring it out for yourself. So if that's not your thing, just read the list. And this is a good segue into talents because typically, after you've figured out whether or not they're an on-fielder, this will tell you what exactly they're going to be useful for. Every character has a normal, a skill, and a burst that can individually be leveled up, but typically each character has one that they utilize way better than the other ones. And if you click into one and click talent upgrade reference, you can see which one the community agrees is that talent. And for Kaya, it's his burst. You just match the icons, which means the community considers the burst to be the most important part of Kaya's kit. So his playstyle will be revolved around that. It's basically the only thing you have to focus on with him. This game follows a pretty standard 80-20 rule, which is a life priority rule where you find the 20% that is going to give you 80% of the results. And in this case, the Glacial Waltz is the 20% of Kaya's kit that will give you 80% of his utility. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to the rules, but some characters' utilities are not from one of those three talents specifically. Some of their utility comes from either of these two passive talents, which you get just by leveling up the character. And as long as you get your character to level 60 out of 70, you will unlock both of them. This is relevant for Shen Yun, which I, unfortunately, learned through mistakes, where I leveled up her burst, wondering why it wasn't making a difference to plunge damage, only to figure out that this passive talent here is the one that increases plunge damage. It was a great time. This is also relevant for Escoffier, which is one of the newest characters here. And honestly, this is good news because if you really like a character, you want to get them to at least 80 out of 90 anyway. So you will get these, but it's useful to know. Okay, demo time. We're going to start as simple as possible. Solo Kaya. So I said that his burst was his recommended talent, right? And if we check this list here, we know he's an off-fielder. So basically with Kaya, his specific only role is to get enough energy here that you can activate his burst and activate it. That's it. That's all you have to do with him. And if this team was more rounded out with other characters, you would switch to the next one and you would focus being on field with them while Kaya's burst was doing off-field damage. The only time you would use his skill is to generate those particles to build up his burst. And his normal attacks, pretty weak, so don't use them. We're gonna check that out. We're gonna put Yanfei on the team. And we'll do a little demo to see why it's important that you switch Kaya off field to continue with Yanfei, instead of just using Kaya on field. Okay, not much. Now we're going to see what Yanfei can add to the team by being the on-fielder while Kaya's burst is off-field. Now again, checking the site, Yanfei, on-fielder. Talent priority, normal attacks. And we got more damage. Now, obviously, this wasn't a super significant damage increase, largely because these just aren't very good characters. But we're beginning to see the power of the rotation, which is using the characters what they're designed for, versus just smashing a bunch of buttons like a caveman. But a team doesn't have 2 characters only, does it? No, no, no. It has 4, who all have individual kits and talents that you have to learn and understand in order to use them properly, which can feel overwhelming. But here's a quick breakdown on team building. The most common team structure is the old reliable team. A main DPS, 1 or 2 sub DPSs, and 1 or 2 supports. You can look at it as 1 on-fielder and 3 off-fielders. Most of the best teams follow this structure. And if it seems a little confusing, I did make an entire video about team building. So you can check that out. It should clear everything up for you. But it basically means you have 3 characters that you're going to set up to do their thing off field while the on-fielder steps up to wrap it all together. Okay, so we saw the rotation for these 2, right? Kaya burst into Yanfei normal attacks. Obviously, it gets more convoluted than that the more characters you add. But in order to understand those rotations, you have to think about cooldowns. So every skill and burst has a duration and a cooldown. That's what CD stands for. Duration is how long it lasts, and the cooldown is how long until you can do it again. For the skill, you just have to worry about the cooldown because you can cast it again as soon as it's over. But for the burst, you can cast it again at the end of these 15 seconds, but you also need to have enough energy down here in order to do it. Just something to keep in mind. I'll talk about it more in a second. So say we want to round out this team and the last 2 characters we add are Bennett and Xingqiu. How do we know what order to use these guys in? We look at their talents. Xingqiu, his priority is his burst. His burst has a duration of 15 seconds. Bennett's talent priority is also his burst, and it has a duration of 12 seconds. Kaya's priority is burst. It has a duration of 8 seconds. The rule is to start with the longest duration and work your way down to the shortest. So the rotation would be Xingqiu burst, Bennett burst, Kaya burst, Yanfei on field. And we do this just so everything's working together at the same time. All the bursts are activated and they're all helping each other. If we started with Kaya, it's going to take a few seconds to do everyone else before we get to Yanfei. So by the time we do get to Yanfei, we're only going to have a couple of seconds of Kaya's burst on field when we're actually trying to do the damage. So that doesn't help. Plus, the reaction between Cryo and Pyro is melt, which is very powerful. So if you're losing melts, you're losing damage. Bad. And that's a pretty beginner rotation, just activating the bursts. The reason I say that is because we need energy to fill up this burst meter, right? If we just burst and then start attacking, we're not building any energy. But if we skill and then burst, you'll notice we capture those particles and we still have all that uptime on the burst to do whatever damage we were going to do. This is just to give you a little bit of a head start for the next rotation, so you can be closer to using it at the end of the cooldown. And this is where the energy recharge stat comes into play. The more energy recharge you have, the more of that meter will fill per particle that you catch. So this is generally an important stat to build up if your main talent priority is the burst. If it's skill or normal attack, you don't have to worry about this. So here's a demo of a bad rotation. Disgusting. It was all over the place. There was no order, no structure, no formation, just absolute chaos. And we could see how much damage it did. But this will be an example of the recommended rotation, where you start with the longest duration talent and work your way towards the shortest. So let's see. Wasn't that nice? Structured, ordered, strategic. Gordon Ramsay would be proud. In the first one, I was just mashing whatever. I was just hitting buttons, normal attacking skill, burst, whatever felt like I should just go for it. But the second one, I stuck with the durations, made sure everything was activated at the same times, and they all worked together to do more damage. So this is a little example of what you might see if you make those changes. Quick caveat, well, a couple really. But some of you might be watching this and thinking that some characters use more than just one talent. You'd be correct, which makes it a little tougher to prioritize not only which one to level, but also the timing and durations of the rotation. So characters like Al-Hytham, he kind of uses his normal skills and bursts as part of his rotation, but his main one is the skill. Someone like Xiao's most important talent is his burst, but it's also important to level up his normal attack stuff because this increases his normal charge and plunging attack. So giving it a higher baseline is beneficial. Or someone like Shenhe, where you use her skill and her burst usually in the same rotation, and they both have different durations, 12 seconds and 10 or 15. So you could use them in different ways, which could get a little confusing, but
we have resources.
Kachingmains.com. I've recommended this site forever. But if you click on guides, you find the character you want to look at right here. Usually the extended guide has this, but the quick guide does not. So if you go to teams, you could scroll down a little bit and usually find rotation advice. So if you know you're going to use Shenhe with Kazuha, here's an example team, and here's an example rotation. So you can check these out. The other caveat is artifacts, specifically support ones. Because usually if it's for an on-fielder, something like Risley with the Marashusei Hunter, this works while he's on field and doesn't work while he's not on field. So usually you don't have to worry about those. But someone like Shenhe, who is an off-fielder, will likely have a support artifact set that you might want to take into consideration. She has Noblesse Oblige right now, which is a support set that increases party members' attack by 20% for 12 seconds. Now this has its own duration. So now, if you go to talents, her recommended talent is the skill. But if you just do the skill and move on to the next character, this needs the burst to activate. You'll never activate this artifact set and you'll lose out on 20% attack for 12 seconds. So this is kind of like step 2 in the difficulty, or strategizing at least. Or someone like Nahida, where her main talent is her skill and it lasts for 25 seconds, which is a hell of a long time. But her artifact is Deepwood Memories, which decreases resistances for 8 seconds. So the talent would insinuate that she would be first in the rotation because it's the longest skill. But the artifact is very strong and only lasts for 8 seconds. So it might be worth putting her a little later in the rotation so that whoever you switch into next is doing more damage. But again, higher level stuff, and there's always exceptions to the rule, and the world is chaos, and yeah, we get it. So I would say just master the talent duration stuff first, and once you get a handle on it, then pay attention to the artifacts and all that. And if you want to time stuff, go ahead. But honestly, it's a game. You don't have to get too greasy. Unless you want to, then have at it. Okay, now reactions. Everybody knows that reactions are the main fighting style in this game. It's what makes this game unique, although at this point, a lot of games have adopted this sort of elemental play style. But the reason why we focus on reactions so much is because they do the bulk of the damage. There are some mono element teams where there are no reactions at all, it's just one element doing the damage, but they're pretty few and far between. And honestly, they're kind of boring. Now, at this point, this moment in time, there are 14 reactions. Who knows how many there will be in the future? Maybe Skirk will add something, who knows? But there are 7 reactions that people typically make teams around. And in order of popularity and strength, we have Frozen at the bottom. It's surfaced a bit with some new characters, and the Frozen reaction itself isn't very strong, but the mix of Cryo and Hydro is pretty strong. Then there's Electro Charged, which is pretty good. It activates very quickly. Then we have Spread and Aggravate, which is pretty strong. Next is Overloaded, which is pretty strong, and we have Chevreuse, who facilitates the reaction, I guess you could say. We have Hyper Bloom, which is pretty powerful and pretty easy to build. A lot of people use it as a metric for strength. And then we have the 2 most popular Vape and Melt. Vape is a little easier to pull off, but Melt is the strongest. So if you want to see those giant snapshot shots of boss videos on the internet of people doing crazy numbers, it's probably going to be either a Vape or a Melt. And most recently Melt because of Sitlali. But if you want a full tier list of the reactions and what I think of them, I made this video here, which will explain them a little more in depth. And honestly, they might be a little tiny bit outdated, so feel free to roast me. I don't know. So let's use a Melt team for this example. It's Pyro and Cryo, and we have Pyro and Kaya for Cryo, but Xingqiu's going to be replaced with Rosaria, just because her kit and Kaya's kit are pretty similar. So this will be our example team. But the rule for the reactions is typically you have applicators and then you have the reactors. Usually the applicators are doing their thing off field while the reactor is the on-fielder causing the reaction. So in this case, Kaya and Rosaria are going to be the cryo applicators and Yanfei is going to be the reactor doing the damage. Basically, all you want to make sure is that the enemy always has a cryo symbol above its head so that you know when Yanfei attacks, she will trigger a melt. So I'm going to activate Kaya and Rosaria's burst and we're going to take a look at the aura above the enemy's head. It's a bunch of cryo, but as we're attacking, you can see that it disappears, right? And as I'm attacking with Yanfei, she's triggering melts. And then the cryo symbol disappears. All right. Now, Yanfei was attacking pretty slowly, and I will explain why a little later. But basically, we were just ensuring that the enemy had cryo so that we knew for certain when Yanfei attacked, she would trigger the melt. Now, there is an entire subspecies of human being who figured out exactly which elements are prioritized and in what order and how many attacks you can do and what sequence and blah, 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 blah. It is a science. And let me tell you, if algebra wasn't your strong suit in school, run. Don't look at this. But if you want to get deep in the weeds of exactly how these reactions work with the timing and the application and all of that, look into gauge units or watch this video. Honestly, I think this guy is a genius. He goes super in depth into all the numbers. So I'll put this link in the description. Now, one thing you might have noticed while I was attacking with Yanfei just there is that not every one of her attacks melted. She was the only one melting, but not every single one of her attacks was melting. So you might want to keep in mind ICD, which stands for internal cooldown.
Warning!
I just started learning about this and I've gotten through everything in the game without needing it or really working around it. So treat this as like the sprinkles to the ice cream that is war or fighting, or even just as an explanation for why every one of her hits wasn't doing what you would expect them to do. ICD is basically how frequently an element can be applied with an elemental attack. All right, we're gonna use this cryo guy as a test dummy because we don't need to apply cryo to it. It's permanently cryo. So look, I'm attacking, but melt is only happening every once in a while. Right? It's not every hit. And what's happening is the ICD is preventing a melt on every single hit. These characters would be crazy overpowered if you could melt every hit. Let's be honest. What the hell? Wow, turns out I've never fought this guy before. But basically, the rule is you could apply the element once every 2.5 seconds or once every 3 hits of the same move. Meaning, consistently normal attacking would be once every 3 hits. But if after one normal attack, you skill, we saw 2 melts because it was a different move. The ICD started the 2.5 second or 3 hit timer for the normal attack, but it set another timer for the skill. So they're on 2 different timers. And if you were gonna do a burst on top of that, you would have seen another melt, even a charged and plunging attack. And again, that's kind of higher level stuff, so you don't really have to worry about it, but it's useful to keep in mind if you want to bump up your damage and you've already mastered the basics. So to summarize, you want to structure your on-fielder and your off-fielders. Make sure you know who's going to be the one on-field attacking and who's going to support them. You're going to level up the important talents. Find the recommended talent for that character and focus on that. That's their kit. Rotate between the characters from long duration talent to short duration, just to make sure everyone's working together, and choose a good reaction to base that team off of. And keep in mind ICDs if you want to be a freaky little nerd. Again, this wasn't meant to be a super deep dive into all the mechanics of fighting in this game. These are more just for the beginner to mid game, maybe even a little bit of a late game player. So hopefully you learned a thing or two, or three. And if you think I missed anything, put it down there. We'll see you for the next one. Ciao.